Meredith Walsh was standing in the middle of my kitchen at 7 in the morning, trying to zip up her jacket with one hand while the other held her phone, her coffee, and what I was pretty sure was a granola bar she had stolen from my cabinet. She was wearing a rust-colored blazer over a gray dress, her dark hair half pinned and half loose, and she kept glancing at the door, like the door had personally wronged her. I said, "You're going to drop the coffee," she said. "I'm not going to drop the coffee." She dropped the granola bar. She stared at it on the floor. I picked it up. She took it back without looking at me and shoved it into her bag, and I stood there in my kitchen in yesterday's sweatshirt, trying to figure out when exactly Meredith Walsh had become the thing my apartment felt organized around. She'd been my best friend for 3 years. The granola bar was hers. The drawer it came from had been unofficially hers for about 18 months. The mug she was drinking from had her name written on it in Sharpie, because, she kept claiming, my mugs were too small and had shown up one Tuesday with her own. She said, "Can you just?" and turned her back to me, lifting the collar of the blazer so I could see the zipper was caught on the lining. I crossed the kitchen and took the fabric in both hands and worked the zipper free slowly, trying not to pull. She stood still. I could see the back of her neck, a small curl that had escaped the pin, the way her shoulders were doing that thing where they looked settled, but weren't. Meredith was an architect. Not the kind who made things look expensive, the kind who spent 3 weeks arguing with a city planning committee over why a community center in Scarborough deserved actual natural light, and not a row of skylight-shaped, fluorescent panels. She cared about things that most people treated as details. She also never admitted when she was nervous, which meant you had to learn to read it off her body, the same way you'd read a blueprint. In the structure, not the surface. Tonight was the Hillcroft Award dinner. Her firm had been nominated. She had been nominated, technically, though she would correct anyone who said that, because she didn't work on projects alone, and she did not like people thinking she did. The dinner was at the Fairmont Royal York in downtown Toronto. Formal. Expensive. Full of people whose opinions she pretended not to care about. She was supposed to go with her boyfriend, Marcus. Marcus had called it off 9 days ago. She hadn't cried on my couch about it. Not exactly. She'd come over with Thai takeout and sat cross-legged on my floor, eating pad see ew out of the container and said, "I think I've been holding that relationship together, with one hand behind my back," and he never once asked why the hand was there. That was Meredith. She didn't fall apart. She just quietly set something down and walked away from it, and the only way you knew she was still thinking about it was that she got very efficient about everything else. So, when she called and asked if I'd be her +1 for the dinner, I said yes before she finished the question. That was just how things worked between us. I got the zipper loose. There. She turned around and looked at me. Her eyes did something that I didn't have a word for. "Thank you. You look," I started, and then I said the honest version of it instead of the safe one. "You look really good tonight, Mer." She went still. Just for a second. A small stillness, the kind you couldn't plan. "That," she said quietly, "was not how you usually say that." I could have walked it back. I had plenty of practice doing that with her. Instead I said, "No, I guess it wasn't." The room did something after that. Same kitchen, same gray counter, same plant on the windowsill that she had picked out, because she said I needed something alive in here. But the air changed slightly. The way it does before something gets named. Her phone rang. She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, then answered it. "Hi, Preet." Her voice went smooth and professional so fast it was almost alarming. "No, don't move the Hendrix table. They need to be near the east wall because of the acoustics." "What do you mean the place cards aren't?" "No, they're in the white binder. The white one. Preet." She paused, listening, and I watched her expression sharpen into something that looked like calm, but was actually the opposite of panic. "Give me 20 minutes. She hung up and looked at me. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. Place cards? Place cards. She picked up her bag. And apparently someone seated the jury chair beside the project lead from Kessler Group, which is either a clerical error or sabotage. And right now I can't rule either out. I'll get an Uber. She stopped at the door and turned back. I was already looking at her. She was already looking at me, with her blazer straight and her bag over her shoulder, and something behind her eyes that she had not put away yet. If you do that thing again tonight, she said. The way you just said that, I'm not going to be able to keep acting like I didn't hear it. Then she opened the door and walked out into the hallway, and I followed her, my keys in my hand and my pulse doing something it didn't usually do on the way to a work dinner. The Fairmont Royal York looked the way it always did, which was like a building that had simply decided a long time ago that it was not going to be impressed by anything. Tall ceilings. Marble floor. The kind of lighting that made everyone look like they'd slept 8 hours and had opinions about wine. Meredith stopped just inside the entrance and took one quiet breath and became someone else. Not fake, just sharpened. Shoulders settled, chin up. The version of her that knew how to stand in a room full of people who were quietly measuring each other and make none of that visible on her face. I had seen her do it at smaller things. Tonight it landed differently. Because 20 minutes ago, she'd been in my kitchen, dropping a granola bar and letting me see the back of her neck while I fixed her jacket. Preet appeared from somewhere near the coat check, a slim woman in a black blazer, with the particular expression of someone who had been managing small disasters for the last 3 hours. Okay, good, Meredith said. Worst thing first. Preet took a breath. Place cards are fixed. Kessler table is now beside the west wall, which means they're near the bar, which might actually help. The issue is that Alderman Chen is here and he brought his wife and she paused, his other wife, from before, and someone seated them on the same side of the room. Meredith's mouth pressed flat for half a second. How close together? Close enough that they've already made eye contact. Move the second table 3 meters north. Put the floral centerpiece from table 4 between them, and tell the caterer we need the appetizer pass to start from the east side first. Buy me 10 minutes. Preet nodded so fast her earrings swung. On it. She was gone. Meredith turned to me. Welcome to award season. I've never felt more useful just by standing here. Don't undersell it. Upright and calm is a genuine contribution tonight. I took her coat. She smoothed her blazer, and for 1 second, just before she turned toward the room, she looked like herself again. Not the sharpened version, not the event version, just Meredith, with her half-pinned hair and a granola bar probably still at the bottom of her bag, standing in a very expensive room and trying to hold everything together without letting it show that she was holding anything. Then a board member from her firm came toward us, and she was gone. For the next hour, I learned what it actually meant to be an emotionally stable +1. At a professional dinner, I carried a coat to the wrong rack and had to find it again. I redirected a journalist who wanted a quote from Meredith before the results were announced by telling him she was currently consulting with the project team, which was technically true if you counted the fact that she was across the room, looking at something on Preet's tablet with her jaw set. I found the right white binder on a side table near the registration desk and brought it to Preet without being asked, which earned me a look from Preet that I think meant she was adding me to her list of people she would trust in a crisis. Every few minutes, I caught a glimpse of Meredith. She moved through the room the same way she walked through a construction site. Purposeful and quiet, her eyes tracking things. Other people weren't watching yet. I'd seen her on those sites. Hard hat, rolled drawings under one arm, pointing at load-bearing walls, and talking about the way light moved through a space at 4 in the afternoon. She talked about buildings, the way some people talked about people. Like they had an interior life, you had to earn the right to understand. I found her near the seating roster standing very still, one hand pressed lightly against her ribs. Spiraling? I said. Architecturally composing myself, she said without looking up. That's not a thing. It is for me. She looked up. The room was loud around us. I was close enough to keep it private. What? She said. You've already fixed everything. You know that, right? She stared at me for a second longer than the question needed. He's here, she said, quieter. I didn't have to ask who. I turned before she said anything else, and Marcus was across the room, in a charcoal suit, standing near the bar with someone from his firm. He was the kind of handsome that photographs well, the kind that made you trust him immediately at a party, and then, about 6 months in, realized that the trust had always been running slightly ahead of the evidence. He looked over, saw Meredith, then saw me. His expression did something small and controlled. He came toward us. Meredith. He kissed her cheek like it was a habit. Then he looked at me. I don't think I've met your— This is Owen, she said. He shook my hand. Right, the architect friend. He made it sound like a category. I've heard about you. I said, good things, I hope. He smiled. She always made you sound very reliable. He said it like reliable was a polite word for something smaller. Glad she had someone to bring tonight. Meredith's hand found my sleeve. We should get to the table. She steered me away before I could say anything else, through a side corridor between the main hall and a smaller room with coat racks and folding chairs. The second the door closed behind us, she let go of my sleeve and pressed her back against the wall. I knew he'd be here, she said. His firm is sponsoring the event. I just thought— She stopped. I thought I'd be more okay with it. You are okay with it. I'm managing it. Same thing sometimes. She looked at me. He used to say I was too focused, that my work took up too much space. She said it flatly, not bitterly, and then when I tried to take up less space, he said I was withdrawing. That's not a you problem. I know. She pressed her fingers against her eyes carefully, not enough to smear anything. I know that. I just sometimes still hear it in his voice. You don't have to listen to his voice anymore. She dropped her hands. You are very annoying to have around when you keep being right. I've been told. She laughed. Not a performed laugh, the real one, small and quick, that she only did when something actually surprised her. It sat in her chest for a second, and some of the tension in her shoulders dropped. The door opened. Preet leaned in, slightly flushed. The firm's director wants a word with you before the announcement, and I can't find the— Is this a bad time? Meredith was already straightening. No. Let's go. I loosened my tie and followed them back into the room. My job for the next 20 minutes apparently involved holding a folder that Preet kept needing to put down, redirecting a waiter who was serving the wrong table's wine order, and standing near enough to the door that when the director finished his remarks and gestured toward Meredith, she walked past me, and I could hand her the folder without either of us having to say anything. She glanced back at me as she crossed the room. I made a small go gesture with my chin. She turned and walked toward the front, like she had always been heading there. I stood near the back and watched her talk to a man in a dark jacket, and nod at something he said, and point at something on the folder page with the particular authority of someone who has walked this project through every stage from napkin sketch to occupancy permit. She did not look nervous. She looked like herself. That was the most attractive thing I had ever seen. Preet appeared at my elbow with 2 glasses of sparkling water. She doesn't let a lot of people in her corner, she said. I'm not sure I'm in her corner exactly. Preet looked at me. You've been carrying things and standing quietly in the right places all night. She handed me a glass. That's what her corner looks like. Marcus never came to these? Marcus came twice. Left early both times. Said events like this made him feel like a prop. She sipped her water. You've been a prop twice in the last hour, and you seem fine. I prefer structurally necessary. She smiled. She said you'd say something like that. Before I could answer, Preet was pulled toward a table issue, and I turned back to find Meredith. She was still talking with the director, but she looked toward me at exactly that moment. The way you look toward someone in a crowd, when you've been tracking where they were without realizing it. Something moved across her face, gone before I could name it. I looked away first. Marcus materialized on my left. He had his drink in one hand and a look on his face that I recognized. The polished version of something less polished underneath. She's good at this, he said, watching her. She is. She's good at all of it. He turned the glass in his hand. The work, the room, the holding it together. He paused. She just doesn't always let you hold any of it with her. I kept my voice even. Maybe that depends on how you try to hold it. He looked at me. She carry her buildings home with her? Talk through every project detail? Go quiet for 3 days when a client changes the brief? Yeah, I said. And she makes really good coffee when she's been up since 5 thinking about a ceiling height. And she'll tell you the exact reason a staircase feels wrong before she can explain anything else that's bothering her. And she argues about paint colors like they matter, because they do. I looked at him. You don't get to describe those things to me like they're problems. His jaw did something. He finished his drink. She's very lucky, he said finally, to have a friend like you. He walked away toward the bar. I turned and found Meredith standing 6 feet away, looking at me. She had clearly been there long enough. She crossed toward me and stopped close. How much of that did you hear? I asked. Enough. Her voice was careful. You didn't have to do that. I know. She was quiet for a second. The room moved around us without touching us. You've been doing that for 3 years, she said. Showing up before I ask. Knowing what I need before I can say it. Carrying the folder without being asked. She looked down at her hands. I kept thinking. I kept telling myself it was just how you were with everyone. It's not. She looked up. Her eyes were steady and a little too warm. I know, she said softly. That's what I've been trying not to think about. From across the room, someone said, Meredith, and she turned like a person who has trained themselves to respond to their name in professional contexts, no matter what else is happening. A photographer was setting up near the award display, and the event coordinator was gesturing toward the finalists. Meredith looked back at me. Don't go anywhere. I'm easy to find. I'll be the one standing near the water glasses, looking underqualified. You're the most qualified person in this room. She said it simply, like it was structural. Then she walked toward the photographer. Preet appeared from nowhere and pressed a small piece of shortbread into my hand that she had stolen from a dessert tray, which I took as a professional endorsement. The announcement came 20 minutes later. Meredith's firm won. The room applauded, and the director said a few things about the project and the community impact in Scarborough and how good design was. Ultimately, about the people inside the building. And not the building itself, which was exactly what Meredith had said to me once while we were standing outside the community center. She'd spent 14 months arguing into existence. She shook hands, she smiled, she said the right things. And when she came back toward me across the room, she had already started to let the professional version of herself relax around the edges. The way a building settles after the scaffold comes down. She stopped in front of me. We won. I know. I was there. The Scarborough Community Center beat out 4 firms that have been doing this for 40 years. I know that too. She was still glowing, slightly, in the way that exhausted people glow, when something they cared about very much turns out to have mattered. She touched my arm. Thank you for being here. There's nowhere else I'd be. She looked at me for a moment, longer than thank you usually required. Then Preet called her name from across the room, and she squeezed my arm once and turned, and I stood there watching her go. Already knowing that the night was going to change gears again before it ended. The last guests left around 10:30. The main hall was being quietly broken down, the centerpieces already carried away, the tablecloths folded by a hotel events team that moved through the room like they'd done this 1,000 times. The award sat on the side table near Preet's bag, a small glass thing that caught the light. Meredith came to find me near the coat check. She had traded her heels for the flats she'd had in her bag, which I hadn't noticed until now, and she looked 3 centimeters shorter and significantly more human. "Preet's wrapping up," she said. I told her we'd get the award home. She sat on the bench near the check-in counter and put both feet on the floor and exhaled the way you exhale when you have been performing for 5 hours. And the audience has finally left. Not collapsing, just landing. I sat beside her. Not right beside her, close enough. "The ceiling in this room is original," she said. "Restored in 2001. You can tell because the plasterwork in the northwest corner doesn't quite match the original molding depth." She paused. "I come to events in this building, and I always end up looking at the ceiling." "I know," I said. "You pointed it out the first time you brought me here." She looked at me. "That was 18 months ago. I remember." She was quiet. The room ticked down around us. A cartwheel somewhere, a door closing, 2 hotel staff talking quietly near the far end. Then she said, "When Marcus and I ended, you know what he said?" She looked at the floor. "He said I was already gone long before he left. That I had 1 foot somewhere else the whole time." She was calm, saying it. And the thing is, he wasn't entirely wrong. I was somewhere else. She stopped. "You didn't know what to call it," I said. She looked at me. "I knew what to call it," she said quietly. "That was the problem." The room got very still. I said, "Mirror." She said, "I know. I've been standing next to you for 3 years. I know that too. Every time you needed someone. You were there every time I needed someone," she said. "And I kept putting the safe name on it because I didn't know what I would do if I said the real one and you." She stopped herself. "And you didn't feel the same way, Meredith." She looked at me. "I drove 40 minutes in a November snowstorm to help you hang a whiteboard in your office. I know every project you've worked on since the first one you told me about. I bought a coffee maker I didn't need, so you'd have something decent to drink when you stayed too late to drive home. I am not here, because we're friends." She stared at me. "You bought that coffee maker for me? It has a built-in grinder." Her mouth pressed together like she was trying not to smile. She didn't quite manage it. I leaned a little closer. "You knew what to call it, you said." She met my eyes. "Yeah. So call it." She held my gaze for 1 more second, long enough that I could hear the soft sound of the room settling around us. Then she said, "I have been in love with you for at least 2 of these 3 years, and I did not tell you, because you were the one thing I didn't want to risk getting wrong." I reached for her hand. She let me take it. "You didn't get it wrong," I said. She leaned in before I could say anything else, and kissed me, sitting on a bench in the Fairmont Royal York, with both our coats over her lap and a glass award on the table beside us, and the hotel staff pretending extremely professionally not to notice. It didn't feel new. That was the thing about it. It felt like something I had already known, and simply not said out loud. Like when you finally read the label on something you've been using for years and realize you already knew what was in it. She pulled back and rested her forehead against mine. "For the record," she said, "I knew about the coffee maker." "What?" The grinder attachment was still in the box, unused. "For 2 weeks before I came over." She tilted her head slightly. "You bought it for me." "I told you it was for." "You told me you'd suddenly developed an interest in fresh ground beans. I stand by that." She laughed, quiet and close, and the sound of it did something to me that the kiss hadn't finished doing. I drove her home just before midnight. The gardener was empty going east. The lake dark on the left side. The city lights reflecting off low cloud the way they do in late October in Toronto. Orange and blurred at the edges. She didn't turn on music. She just sat with her shoes off, one foot tucked under her, the award on her lap, her hands still in mine over the console. At her apartment in Leslieville, I walked her up, same as I'd done a dozen times after late nights. Same elevator with the scratched door panel. Same hallway that always smelled vaguely of cardamom from the apartment at the end. But when we reached her door, she turned and looked at me with that expression I had spent 3 years trying to be careful around. "Thank you," she said, "for being exactly who you are. That's the easiest thing I've ever done." She smiled. Then she looked down at her jacket, and then back up at me, and said, "The zipper's fine this time. I just wanted a reason to stand here another minute." I stepped closer. "You don't need a reason." She held my eyes. "No," she said. "I guess I don't." She kissed me once more in the hallway. Just briefly, like a full stop at the end of a sentence that had taken 3 years to write. 6 weeks later, Preet sent me a small potted plant with a card that said, "For the corner man." And I put it on my windowsill, next to the one Meredith had picked out 18 months ago. And together they looked like they had always been there. Meredith still came over too early and stayed too late. She still corrected my furniture arrangements. She still took the granola bars. I still bought extra. She still talked about buildings on the way home, from other buildings. And I still listened. Because she always eventually got to the part that mattered. The light in the east-facing room in the afternoon. The staircase that felt wrong until it didn't. The wall they almost removed until she said, "Wait, that wall is what makes the room feel safe." And that part was always worth waiting for. Nothing between us felt new. It just finally had the right name.